Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to walk through how to use the switch axe in Monster Hunter Wilds. So I'll go through the moveset of the weapon, showing off the various combos and attacks that you can do, as well as touch on some other aspects of how this weapon works. So if you haven't used this weapon yet and you're curious about it, or if you have used it and you're a little bit confused on the various gauges and things like that, hopefully this will help you out. Alright, so first just kind of a quick general overview of how this weapon works, as there are a few unique characteristics with it. As the name implies, the switch axe, there are two different modes that you can switch between, one being the axe and then the other being the sword. So the standard mode of this weapon, I suppose, is kind of the axe version. So if you hit the standard attack button, it'll automatically pull it out as the axe version. And then depending on your inputs, this might be different, but for me it's the right trigger on the Xbox controller that will swap it over to the sword mode, so you can see that blade kind of unfold back and forth between the two modes. So as you're fighting, you can switch between the two. Each has its own unique moveset that we'll talk about later, but that's what those look like. With the weapon sheathed, you can also go directly into sword mode by just opening up with that right trigger, and you can see that'll immediately put you into sword mode as well. So those are what they look like. Another call out is you'll notice you move quite a bit slower with the sword mode. So then if we go back into the axe mode, you can speed up a little bit. So keep that in mind as well. As mentioned, the axe is kind of the default version, and then the sword, one benefit there is that it will utilize the file effect of the weapon. So if we take a look at my current weapon here, on the right, you can see I've got the exhaust file. So utilizing the sword, and we'll talk a little bit more about this again when looking at the sword, it'll utilize that exhaust effect. And then the other important call out with this weapon is the gauge system. So you can see that in the upper left part of my screen. There are three individual gauges, and they all kind of relate to switching back and forth between the sword and the axe. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about how those work as we get into the movesets and whatnot. But the first gauge, which is pretty much full right now in yellow, that is the switch gauge. And that's basically going to determine whether you have the ability to switch to the sword version of the weapon and then also use it. So the way this works is it gets filled up as you attack with the axe. So as you land attacks with your axe, that'll fill up. And then if we pull out the weapon and go into sword mode, you'll notice with the sword out, as I attack, that's going to deplete. So that yellow or that white line towards the left, that's the 30% meter. So you need to have that at least 30% full to switch into sword mode. So if we deplete this real quick by attacking like that. All right, so now you can see we're below the 30% threshold. So if we switch back into axe mode, if we try and switch into sword mode, it's not going to work. Instead, it's going to do this reload animation. So I'll hit the right trigger. You can see that there. That's going to give you some of your gauge meter filled enough to switch to sword mode. So now we can switch into sword mode. So you either have the option to do that, you kind of do a reload animation, or you could just go attack in axe mode for a little bit until it passes that 30% threshold. And then the two gauges below that, so the one on the left is related to the axe and the one on the right is related to the sword. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the axe has its power axe mode, so that will be that gauge, and then the sword has its amped version, so that has that mode as well. So starting off, we can go through all of the moves with this weapon in axe mode. So we can pull that out here, and starting with the standard attacks, which again, using an Xbox controller is going to be the Y and B buttons for me. So starting with the attacks using the Y button, and again, keep an eye on the switch gauge up in the upper left there. You can kind of see the impact of that building up with these attacks as well. So first off, we just kind of have a basic attack, which is the Y button, and that's going to do an overhead slash. You can also do forward plus Y, which is a forward slash attack, as you can see there. And then we also have a 3 input combo, hitting the Y button 3 times. Keep an eye on the switch gauge again, as that last attack does sort of a more enhanced build up with that. So first we have the overhead slash, then the side slash, and then finally the spiral burst slash, which again you can see fills up that meter quite a bit. Next, going through the B attacks. So first up we have the wild swing. So you can see that here. Just pressing that once, you can see it does a sort of a 2 input attack. However, you can just keep pressing the button over and over to continuously do that wild swing. So you have that one. Similar to the Y, you can do a forward input, which is kind of a dash attack. So forward plus B does that forward overhead slash attack. And then finally, you can do a combo by hitting B a couple times and then follow that up with Y, which will also put you in that power axe mode as well. So if you take a look and keep an eye on my gauge in the upper left, you'll see that kick in. So do B, 2 or 3 times maybe, and then follow that up with Y. and then that'll do that heavy slam attack, and then also puts us in that power axe mode as well. And then you also have the option to use this combo to follow into sword mode. So if you do the same combo, do B a few times, and then Y, and then immediately follow with right trigger, that will follow up that combo with a morph rising double slash, which then again puts your weapon into sword mode. So speaking of power axe mode, basically what that's going to do is just give you a damage boost to the weapon while using the axe version of it. It's also going to increase the speed that switch gauge fills up as well. So as you can see right now, we're currently not in power axe mode anymore. To just kind of test this out a little bit, you can see doing the Y overhead slash, that does about 67 damage, 66.9. And then we'll get into power axe mode again by doing that wild swings combo. So that gets the power axe mode active, and then we'll do another Y attack. And you can see that increased to 70.7 damage. Now taking a look at some of the other moves that you can do while in the axe mode, the biggest probably being the rising offset slash. So that is done by pressing both the Y and the B button at the same time, so you can see that there. However, you can also do this kind of in two different ways. One is just like a regular attack, as you'll see here. So that's kind of like a heavy attack, did 74.3 damage, I think it said. So you can kind of just use it as a regular kind of heavy attack option. However, where this move becomes really powerful is using it as a counter. So if you do a perfect offset attack, so you do the Y and B input just as the enemy is attacking you, you can do that perfect offset, which will then lead into kind of a combo attack. So you'll fire your hook slinger, which will take you into the enemy, and then you can follow that up with either Y or the right trigger. So taking a look at that, getting our attack timed just as he's attacking us. So zip in, and then you can follow that up with Y or B, as you see there. So there's that. And then also the other option is you can hit the right trigger, which will then morph into the sword mode. So taking a look at that here. So zip in, right trigger, and then you can see that morphs us into sword mode. So now we're using the sword. You can also do a fade slash while in the middle of a combo. So taking a look at that as an example, doing the Y attack combo. So rather than doing 3 Y attacks, you could do Y, Y, and then back B. So that's going to do that fade attack. So Y, Y, and then back B. And that does that fade slash. So taking a look at that in terms of attacking the enemy. So Y, Y, back B. And then finally wrapping things up with the axe version of the weapon, taking a look at the focus attack. So again, on Xbox input, it's the left trigger to go into focus mode, and then the right bumper to do the attack. So you can technically just use it as a regular attack, however, it's not really what it's meant for. You want to use this when there's wounds and weak points. So taking a look at that, here the enemy now has wounds, so this is where you'd want to use that focus attack, so going up and hitting the right bumper. So you can see there, you kind of do that devastating combo attack. So you can just kind of leave it at that. However, you do have another option, which is to use the morph mode into the sword, which is going to do an elemental discharge. So kind of the same concept, you run up and hit the right bumper to initiate the attack. However, midway through, if you hit right trigger to morph into sword mode, it'll then finish the combo with that elemental discharge. So here's an example of that. So now I'm going to morph into sword, and you do that discharge finisher with the sword. All right, so now moving into the sword mode for the weapon, we can take a look at all those moves. So starting off, we'll probably have to pay a little bit more attention to the gauge with this mode, as we have the switch gauge as well as the amp gauge to get into amped mode. So we'll demonstrate a little bit and talk about that. But starting off in a normal battle, you may want to build that up a little bit more before you get into sword mode. So starting with axe, you would maybe go in and start attacking with that until you can get that full. So go in and do some attacks there. So now we've got that full, and then we can switch into sword mode and go through those moves. So starting off, just kind of the basic standard attack, similar to what we did with the axe. So the Y button for me, that's an overhead slash. Similarly, you can do a 3-hit combo with that just by hitting the Y button 3 times. So overhead, then right slash, and then left slash. You'll notice as the gauge depletes for the switch gauge, and then our amp gauge is building up as well. The B attack, you have the double slash there, and then you can also follow that up with a little bit of a combo too by hitting it again. So we do that the B button, then hit it again, and then we do the heavenward flurry attack. So at this point, you can see our amp gauge is completely full. And once that happens, that's going to put you in the amped state. So not only is that going to unlock the ability to do some pretty powerful attacks that will put out quite a bit of damage, which I'll demonstrate, but it'll also just kind of do some general additional damage as well based off your file type. So you can see all of the ones there. Again, I mentioned I have the exhaust file type equipped to this weapon. So just kind of demonstrating that, I've now reverted back to normal state. So we can see a overhead slash here does 49.1 damage. And then now with my amp gauge full, being in the amp state, you can see the sword there. And then when we attack, we've got that additional 17 damage in addition to that 49 base damage as well. So you have that kind of additional damage benefit. And then you also have some new attacks that will get unlocked while in this state too. So taking a look at some of those attacks that you can do while in the amp state, the first is if you go up to an enemy and hold the Y and the B button, that will grab on to the enemy, and then you'll do a discharge attack if that's kind of where you leave it. However, if you do that again, and this time once you jump on and then just kind of start spamming the Y button, which I'm doing right now, that'll extend the attack as you see there. It'll also enhance some attacks as well. So as you can see, I'm not currently in the amp state. However, with this move where I'm doing the right trigger, the Y button, and the B button all at the same time, you have that attack there. So that is not in the amp state. However, doing that attack again after filling my amp gauge, you can see that additional effect and damage that it had with it. And then kind of related to that same attack, this one requires that you do have to be in the amp state. So this time if you just hold down the right trigger, Y and B, you'll kind of do a charged version of that, which you can see I'm doing right here, which does a ton of damage. And then finishing things up with a couple other attacks you can do in sword mode. So this one also has a Y plus B attack, which looks like that. However, you can also follow this up with a bunch of Y inputs. So if we do the Y plus B and then start spamming the Y button, it has this elemental discharge finisher that it will do. And then you can actually take that one step further with the combo. So again, doing the Y plus B attack and then spamming the Y button, and then you follow that up with the right trigger. And that will do a follow-up attack, which then puts you into the axe mode. And there's also a counter attack that you can do while in sword mode. So this is kind of similar to the axe where we did the offset slash attack where you have to time the attack of the enemy. If you do that, you'll do a counter attack. And then you can also follow that up with B to do the heavenward flurry attack as well. So we'll get one of those in so you can see what that looks like. So right trigger plus Y. And then you can follow that up with the heavenward flurry attack as well. And then finally, wrapping things up with the sword that has a focus attack just like the axe. So you can go up with the left trigger to get into focus mode and then hit the right bumper to do a combo there. And then you also have the option to hit the right trigger in the middle of the combo to switch from sword to axe to finish with the axe instead. So targeting that, getting that, and then in the middle of it, hitting the right trigger, I morphed into the axe, and I finished with the axe for that combo. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that. Hopefully this video helped you out though and gave you a better idea of how this weapon works in Monster Hunter Wilds. Whether you haven't used it yet, you kind of get more familiar going into it and using it for the first time, or if you have used it, this gives you a better idea of maybe some additional moves you can do or better take advantage of the weapon. So again, I'll kind of leave you at that. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye.